For decades, Steven Seagal's life has been surrounded by noise. Headlines, scandals, sudden disappearances, surprise comebacks, but somewhere beneath it all, there existed a whisper. A whisper so persistent that even Hollywood insiders could never quite bury it. They tried to laugh it off. They tried to shrug it away. But real rumors, the kind rooted in human emotion, real families, real pain, they never really die. And this rumor began with a simple question. Does Steven Seagal have a daughter the world was never supposed to know about? People didn't talk about it loudly. It wasn't printed on magazine covers or shouted by talk show hosts. Instead, it lived in the shadows in quiet conversations on studio sets, in hushed voices inside makeup trailers, in the late-night corners of film festivals where someone would lean closer and say, "You ever hear that story about Seagal?" And the one they kept hidden. Most fans dismissed it as Hollywood nonsense, but others felt something different, a strange pull, a sense that there was more to the legend than the public ever saw. Steven Seagal himself only added to the mystery. His interviews often drifted away from personal topics. He would smile, change the subject, or give answers so vague they created more questions than they solved. But the rumors continued. Some said this daughter lived far from cameras, that she wanted nothing to do with Hollywood. Others said she looked so strikingly like Seagal that anyone who saw her instantly understood why the secrecy existed. And then there were whispers, painful ones, about conflict, about family pressure, about a decision made long before she could speak for herself. Over time, fans began to notice strange patterns. Small contradictions in Seagal's own words, comments from old co-stars, moments in documentaries where something almost slipped. And each time, the community grew more curious. Was this just gossip or a buried truth? Today, after years of silence, fragments of the story have surfaced, enough to finally piece together a picture Hollywood never wanted the world to see. Not because it destroys Steven Seagal, but because it reveals a human side he never allowed anyone close enough to touch. This wasn't just about a missing daughter. It was about legacy, reputation, and the emotional cost of a life built in the spotlight. And once you hear what really happened, you might never look at Steven Seagal the same way again. Behind every Hollywood myth, there is a real childhood, quiet, fragile, shaped by choices the child never made. And for Steven Seagal's rumored daughter, that childhood looked nothing like the polished stories that studios love to sell. Her early life wasn't marked by red carpets or glamorous premieres. Instead, it was shaped by distance, unofficial agreements, and the constant reminder that she was connected to a man the world knew, but she had never truly met. Neighbors remembered glimpses, a quiet girl with sharp eyes, unusually mature for her age. She rarely spoke about her family, but there was always something in her gaze, something almost rehearsed, like she carried stories she wasn't allowed to tell. Some claimed she kept a photograph of Steven Seagal tucked away in a drawer, not framed, not displayed, just kept. Others said she avoided talking about him entirely, as if the name itself was heavy. Too heavy for a child. But children grow up, and questions that can be avoided at age 7 become impossible to ignore at age 17. She started searching, quietly, carefully. She followed interviews, old articles, clues hidden in fragments of Seagal's past. And each time she found something, it only deepened the ache of a family built on silence. And yet, she never confronted him, not because she was afraid, but because she believed something deeper, something heartbreaking. Maybe he didn't want to be found. Meanwhile, the industry kept its distance. Agents whispered that some things are better left alone. Publicists brushed off inquiries with fast, polished sentences. And studio executives, the same ones who had built Seagal's image, knew the truth. A revelation like this would crack the armor Hollywood had spent decades maintaining. But they couldn't hide it forever. As she grew older, her resemblance became undeniable. The posture, the eyes, the quiet seriousness. Even people who had worked with Seagal began noticing. One stunt coordinator said, "You look familiar. Do you have family in the industry?" She didn't answer. She didn't need to. And slowly, the truth began leaking into the public. Not through tabloids, but through people who felt she deserved more than silence. Because this wasn't about claiming fame, money, or a spotlight. It was about identity. It was about the right to know where you come from. And it was the beginning of a truth Hollywood could never fully control. Hollywood is a strange place. It tells stories for a living, yet fears the real ones the most. When the rumor of Seagal's hidden daughter resurfaced, this time louder, sharper, impossible to ignore, the panic began quietly, not in dramatic boardroom meetings or explosive headlines, but in private emails, sudden phone calls, and carefully crafted statements designed to say everything, while revealing nothing. Executives remembered the old days, the era when Steven Seagal was untouchable. His name alone could command a film, a budget, a crowd, and with that power came protection. Studios shielded him, press management teams smoothed the edges, and uncomfortable questions were buried beneath flashier stories. But the world had changed. secrets didn't stay buried anymore. Suddenly, reporters who had dismissed the rumor years earlier began digging. Former co-stars were approached. Assistant directors were contacted. A few even admitted they heard something back in the early 2000s, a name mentioned in passing. A tense conversation behind a dressing room door, a moment where Seagal reacted a little too strongly to a topic he usually ignored. Fans noticed something too. Whenever the rumor trended, Seagal went silent. No posts, no interviews, no statements, just silence. And silence is loud when the world is watching. The studio's biggest fear wasn't scandal. Hollywood survives scandals every day. The fear was deeper, emotional. If this story came out, it would paint Seagal as something he never wanted to be seen as: human, flawed, vulnerable, capable of regret. And yet, the more Hollywood tried to control the narrative, the more it slipped through their fingers. Fans took to forums, connecting details others had overlooked. Independent journalists found inconsistencies in Seagal's past statements, and online communities began piecing together timelines that made too much sense to ignore. What had once been an obscure whisper was now a wildfire. Hollywood wasn't afraid of the truth. They were afraid of what the truth meant for his legacy, for the fans who grew up idolizing him, and for the daughter who had lived her entire life in the shadows. Because once the world learns about a secret family, it stops being a rumor. It becomes part of the narrative forever. And Steven Seagal's story was about to change in a way even the best screenwriters couldn't script. For years, she stayed quiet. She watched from a distance as the rumor spread, faded, returned, and grew stronger. She didn't chase attention. She didn't seek cameras. Instead, she waited. For the world to be ready. Or maybe, for herself to be ready. And then one day, not with a press conference, not with a viral clip, but with a simple message, she stepped out of the shadows. People who saw it described the moment the same way. Calm, steady, heartbreaking. She didn't accuse. She didn't blame. She didn't demand anything. She simply told her story. She spoke softly about growing up with questions. About knowing who her father was and knowing he wasn't there. About the strange duality of having a parent who was known by millions, yet unknown to her. She didn't mention Seagal by name at first. She didn't need to. Her features carried the resemblance more clearly than any sentence could. She explained that coming forward wasn't about fame. It wasn't about money. It wasn't even about him. It was about reclaiming the part of her life that had been whispered about for so long that it no longer felt like her own story. When her message began spreading, fan reaction exploded. Some were shocked, others emotional. Many said they felt something they didn't expect. Empathy. Empathy not just for her, but for Seagal himself, because her story wasn't angry. It was compassionate. It acknowledged mistakes, distance, and the reality that even legends carry regrets they never show on camera. In that tone, gentle, human, honest, cracked open a conversation Hollywood could no longer control. Reporters began asking Seagal for a statement. He didn't give one, but people close to him said he looked troubled whenever the topic came up. Someone even claimed he watched her message more than once. In silence, fans wondered, was he proud, regretful, afraid, or was he simply overwhelmed by the reality that a part of his life, a part he had kept hidden, was now speaking for herself? Regardless of his response, one truth became clear. Her story was no longer a rumor, it was a reality, and the world finally began to see Steven Seagal not as an untouchable action icon, but as a man wrestling with the consequences of his past. In Hollywood, most stories end with noise, flashing lights, dramatic twists, quick resolutions, but real stories, human stories, end quietly. After her message, something unexpected happened. Not a scandal, not a Hollywood meltdown, something simpler. People listened. Fans, filmmakers, journalists, everyone began looking at Seagal's legacy through a different lens. Not judgmental, not cruel, but reflective. They saw a man who built a career on strength and mystery, yet may have spent decades carrying the weight of a secret he wasn't ready to face. But the real twist didn't come from Seagal. It came from her. In a later message, she said something that stunned everyone. What matters isn't who my father was, but who I choose to become. She wasn't chasing validation. She wasn't demanding recognition. She was rewriting the narrative, not of Steven Seagal's life, but of her own. And that's when fans realized something powerful. This story was never just about a hidden daughter. It was about the emotional cost of secrets, the weight of legacy, the way silence can shape a family more deeply than words. Hollywood couldn't stop the story because it wasn't a scandal. It was a reflection, a reminder that even the biggest stars have quiet corners in their lives that never make it onto a movie screen. As the conversation continued, Seagal remained silent, but insiders claimed he had softened, that he had been seen holding an old photograph, that he asked about her more than once, that he wasn't angry, just unsure how to step into a role he had avoided for so long. And maybe that was enough. Maybe the truth wasn't a headline, but a bridge, a fragile, imperfect bridge between past decisions and future possibilities. In the end, what seemed like a Hollywood scandal became something deeper, A reminder that behind every legendary actor is a real human being, and behind every buried secret is someone who lived it. And perhaps the most shocking truth of all was that this story didn't end with confrontation, that it ended with understanding. A truth but the world was finally ready to see. Hollywood tried to hide.